up for property tax statements to December 1st.
Committee, any questions? Any objection? Seeing none, we'll make
Thank
the
you.
request. Thank you. Riley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two bill requests. The first one is 25 RS 0513 for Kansas Pet Advocates. And this is a sales tax exemption for nonprofit shelters and rescues licensed under the Kansas Pet Animal Act.
Committee, any questions? Senator Peterson? Oh, okay. Any objection? Seeing none, we'll make the request.
Okay, and then the second bill is 25 RS 0359 for Friends of Historic Preservation, and it amends the transferability of the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit Act. And this bill was also recommended by the Special Committee on Available and Affordable Housing.
Thank you, Riley. Committee, any questions? Any objection? We'll make the request.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say Representative Highland, but Mrs. Highland, welcome to the committee, Linda.
Thank you. My name is Linda Highland, and thank you, Senator Tyson and committee members. I'm introducing 25 RS 0198. It is the Kansas K-12 Student Scholarship Program Act.
Committee, any questions? Any objection? Seeing none, we'll make the request and tell your husband hi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Senator Peterson, now this is the best request today.
Put the pressure on. It's 25 RS 0207. It's providing a limited income tax credit for expenditures on lockable gun and ammunition storage. In order to prevent bloating the budget, I limited it, so call it the gas tax credit.
Any questions, committee? Any objection? Seeing none, we'll make the request. Thank you, Senator. Well, committee, first off, I'd like to welcome, we have quite a few guests in the audience, Kansas Farm Bureau. Thank you for joining us today. I know you're in the building most of the day, and we're looking forward to seeing our friends. So let's start with Senate Bill 10. Amelia, would you mind giving us an overview?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 10 relates to property taxation and would provide exemptions for certain personal property, including watercraft, marine equipment, off-road vehicles, motorized bicycles, and certain trailers, beginning with tax year 2026.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, Senator Owens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amelia, if I could have you pass out that amendment. I do have an amendment for consideration by the body.
Senator, would you like to explain your amendment and then make the motion?
I certainly will. Thank you, Madam Chair. As we discussed when we heard this bill, you know, the vast majority of aircraft in this state are already tax exempt in one way or another. Some of them have different ways that they are tax exempt. Some of them are automatic. Some of them that are 30 years and older require a BOTA hearing. Simply put, as the air capital of the world, I think we should exempt any aircraft from property taxation. And aircraft I do have defined on here means airplane, helicopter, or other machine capable of flight. And with that, I move my motion.
Is there a second on the motion? I'll second it. Committee, we do have a fiscal note. I'll refer to Eddie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Department of Revenue worked overnight on this and just got it back to us this morning. It adds about $215,000 to the 20 mil piece of this and about $15,000 to the 1.5 mil piece of this relative to the underlying bill. So
Thank you, Eddie.
all total, the state's piece of this would be about $230,000.
Are there any questions? Senator Ware?
So aircraft definition, is there any chance that any of this applies to things like, I mean, this is literally just off the top of my head, no research, but like drones or non-piloted things in any way?
Don't think there's property tax on drones at the, is there?
Well, in the future, there could be, is what I'm thinking, you know, as technology develops.
Eddie?
Madam Chair, reading this definition, I think it might be possible that, yes, there is no requirement here that it be a manned machine, so an unmanned machine capable of flight may qualify.
So at this point, we're good, but maybe later we'd have to look at it if technology developed. Okay.
Thank you. And I want to thank the department for working so diligently to get us these numbers overnight. Thank you. Kathleen. Senator Schallenberg.
Thank you. I recall 88, so let's recall 1988. I voted for a bill to take aircraft off of the inventory. And it was the toughest reelection issue that I dealt with. And even though this is a very small fiscal note, I can see the postcards, and I don't think this will pertain to me, but I can see the postcards with a picture of Grandma's house on it saying that Tim Schallenberger voted to let millionaires not pay tax on their airplanes, but I still have to pay property tax on my house. Now, that's not a true statement, but as we know, that's how postcards work. So I'm going to vote against the amendment, although.
So Senator Schallenberger, you just gave him the language because we passed a bill a few years ago that exempted aircraft and nobody made a statement about it. So it can work both ways. Yeah. We do know that there are individuals that are tagging their planes or housing their planes out of state in order to avoid these taxes. So Senator Clem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's probably worth bringing up a comment that you made yesterday, Senator Owens, in a good way, that there's probably some hangar rental, some additional maintenance that will dramatically be more than the 230 that we're talking about here, and which is a positive of bringing some of that work and that rental of those hangar rentals back into our state. I don't know what that number is. It might be worth trying to have that to combat the inaccurate postcards that will drop as a result of this. So, thank you.
Thank you, committee. Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Committee, what are your wishes on the bill? Yeah. Senator Peck?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would move that the Senate Assessment and Taxation Committee pass Senate Bill 10, 10 out favorably as amended.
It's been moved by Senator Peck, seconded by Senator Starnes. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. I was hoping this would go on the consent calendar, but no, I'm kidding. I don't think we'll have any tax bills on the consent calendar, but committee, I'd like to turn your attention to Senate Bill 35 now. Amelia, thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill number 35 would discontinue the state property tax levies that in the aggregate are 1.5 mils for the Kansas Educational Building Fund and the State Institutions Building Fund after tax year 2025, and provide financing therefore from the State General Fund beginning July 1st of 2026.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, thank you. Senator Starnes. Well, let me ask, are there any questions on the bill yet? Seeing none, Senator Starnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just as far as the Senate bill regarding the 1.5 mils, would like to make an amendment, and it's in the works, as I understand that correctly.
So Senator, yeah, it's not in writing. It would be a conceptual amendment. And we were thinking to use the language that we used on a previous bill when we passed an exemption, or it was, yeah, we were working on the 20K exemption, increasing that in this committee. And I know most of the members were not on the committee at the time. Eddie is looking for, did you find it? Okay, but you can explain it. It's a inflationary factor based off of real estate. Or
My understanding is that what the committee is after is an index that relates to home prices. And we believe it was the 2022 session, the committee took up legislation related to an exemption amount from the statewide school finance levy and linked future increases to that exemption to the year-over-year increase in the Case-Shiller home price index. I believe the actual formal name for it is the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index. But I am struggling to immediately find the bill in which that was done in 2022.
so committee, what I'm going to do then is put us on hold until we find the language and until everybody can be comfortable with what the amendment will actually be. So that way we know what's going on with Senate Bill 10, where we're at on that legislation, or not 10, 35. 35, thank you. So I will turn our attention to, and if we have time, we'll come back to 35. I'll turn our attention to SCR 1603. Amelia, will you give us an overview?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Concurrent Resolution number 1603 is a proposition to amend Section 1 of Article 11 of the Kansas Constitution relating to property taxation. Specifically, the resolution proposes to limit annual increases in the final taxable appraised value of real property and personal property classified as mobile homes except in certain circumstances. The provision also would allow, the legislature to define some terms and enact other legislation. All or any portion of the benefits of the valuation limitation would also be portable or transferable under certain circumstances if the legislature so defined and provided it by state statute. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? Senator Starnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to introduce an amendment to SCR 1603 regarding the benefits of value limitations.
Okay, committee, I think, and there is a handout on that amendment. Thank you, Senator. Senator, do you want to explain the amendment or do you want Amelia to?
Yes, if Amelia would go ahead and explain that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, if you turn to page 2 of the balloon, you will see that currently, one of the exceptions to the valuation limitation is that when title to the property is transferred, changed, or conveyed to another person or entity, that the limitation would not apply. That is the current language. This balloon proposes to remove that circumstance and in its place provide that the benefits of the valuation limitation shall remain in place whenever title to the property is transferred, changed, or conveyed to another person or entity, unless the legislature enacts provisions that provide for exceptions. And then it would also then strike the current sentence in the resolution that provides that the benefits may be portable as provided by the legislature.
Committee, any questions on the amendment? Senator Klemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you give an example of how this would play out in the real world?
Senator Starnes or Amelia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator, the situation would be where the transferable realtors brought to us about the concern, and others have made the same concern in regards to people staying in their homes longer, and then due to the fact that when they would downsize, going to another location and not and having that increase in their property taxes. This would help with the transferability of what they were presently paying, so that the idea in theory would be to help younger families then get into these homes. So that's the purpose of what we're trying to do.
And it's my understanding that so if you built up, say, $20,000 when you were in your home, the difference between the appraised value and the taxable appraised value was $20,000. That $20,000 would transfer with the home. So if you paid $170,000 for the home, then your taxable value would be $150,000. So it's not a complete reset with the sale. It's allowing that earned limit to be transferred with the property. Did I state that correctly? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question, so is this language to be understood is that the benefit runs both to the seller and the purchaser? So if somebody's living in, say, $250,000 home today, they sell that home, they buy a $500,000 home. Is that seller of the $250,000 home and the purchaser of the $500,000 home, are they getting then to be taxed at 250, what they were paying in their previous home? Or are they getting taxed then on the new $500,000 home? And then is the person who purchased that $250,000 home, what are they paying? Are they paying what they paid previously? How would this work in practice with the sale and purchase of a new home? Can you just walk me through that?
So, Senator, the $500,000 home would be the $500,000 unless that home itself had earned a limit, a taxable limit. That would apply to that home buyer. The $250,000 home, that would be the value of that home. And if there was a taxable limit on that home, that limit, that difference would be applied. So it helps first-time home buyers. It helps the person purchasing the home, not selling the home necessarily. You could say that it helps them selling the home too, because the house is going to be more apt to sell with that benefit on it.
Can you explain a little more about how the taxable limits work?
So what we're basing it off of is keeping it with the property. I know there was some question whether it would transfer with the person purchasing the home that owned it or keeping it with the property. This would keep it with the property. So if you had a $100,000 home and your taxable value, your appraised value is $100,000 and your taxable value, you're only at, say, $95,000. So you've got a difference of 5,000 on your taxable value and your appraised from the county appraiser value, $5,000. So the person that purchased that $100,000 home, whatever they paid for it, their taxable value would be the amount they paid minus the $5,000 taxable bill. Unless the appraiser came in at 170,000. Say they paid 150 and the appraiser comes in at 170. Well, their taxable value would be 165,000 then. Because your baseline is the county appraiser's number. So it is a reset, it's a blending that we get the reset, but we get the benefit of the taxable value for all those years.
But you still have a disincentive to move into a new home unless there's already a tax benefit on the property that you're moving to. You still wouldn't get, you would still be disincentivized to
Senator.
downsize or move into a different home, right?
No, because if
I move into from a $250,000 home to a $500,000 home, then I'm paying the full freight on the $500,000 home unless there's already a tax benefit attached to that $500,000 home.
oh, you're paying the full freight now. So there's no disincentive. It's
Right, but if we had this in place, then I'd be getting this massive tax preference to stay in my $250,000 home. So I wouldn't be incentivized to move.
well,
There would be that lock-in effect that we talked about. You'd be getting this massive below-market tax incentive to stay in the $250,000 home. So you'd be disincentivized to move into a larger home or a $500,000 home unless there was already a tax benefit attached to that $500,000 home.
so Senator, that is an interesting argument that has been used, but I have not seen or found any evidence, and anybody has not presented evidence in the 26 states that have assessment limits that situation is occurring.
I mean, this is rampant in California. It's happening everywhere in California. That's why people are leaving California, because they can't afford a home, because basically there's kind of a landed aristocracy where people who have property aren't selling it. There's not houses on the market. Young people are leaving California.
Senator, I think that there's, and we do have a decorum for this committee, I think there are other reasons that people are leaving California, but you can use that argument. So any other comments? Senator Schallenberger.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I understand the amendment. When we worked this bill last year, year before, it's very similar. One of the things that made it more in taxation, you have to be fair. I think this really will create lawsuits because we're not being equitable. So if you build a new home, let's forget the house you're moving in or out of. If you build a new home, they're all going to be taxed at market value. It's a brand new, $300,000 brand new. But if you're in a house that you've had for 20 years and it's still gone up 3%, so no free lunches here, it will be probably under market value. That's the assumption. And so I fear that this could create an equitable problem. And I hate to keep going back in the 80s, but that's what caused the whole thing to start with. This Johnson County was growing, homes were being built, and appraisals in rural areas hadn't kept up with them. There was a lawsuit, and I want this to work. So I'm not saying I'm opposed. I'm thinking about this amendment, but we want whatever we pass to work, and not be challenged in court, and not and be fair. I mean, everybody should get the same kind of treatment into this. So I'm just not sure on this one.
So Senator, yeah, any other comments or questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the Starnes amendment. I think it benefits the seller and the buyer. I don't know that I am going to 100% disagree with Senator Schallenberger's comments. We never know what we pass up here may face some type of a lawsuit challenge. We don't intentionally pass legislation that we're confident will face a lawsuit, but I see this as a great amendment personally. Again, protects buyer, seller, new home builder, purchaser. I see that as a whole different ballgame. I guess I just don't see any issues, not being an attorney, but, so I'm going to support the amendment. I appreciate the amendment being brought forward. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Ware.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this amendment makes the situation better. To Senator Corson's comments, it's not just California. I am locked into my house personally, and I suspect,
Currently locked in, Senator?
well, not with a key, but basically, and so it happens everywhere. To Senator Schellenberger's comment, I think that we've already been introduced with several ways to help the property tax situation. They're alternatives, basically, is what I'm saying. And I think we perhaps haven't looked at all of them carefully. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, no, would you, do you want to move on your motion?
Yes,
Okay.
make the motion.
Okay, is there a second on the motion? It's been moved by Senator Starnes, seconded by Senator Peck. We've had discussion on the motion. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're back on the SCR committee. I have an amendment, actually, for clarification. So one of the items, I was visiting with somebody in the building, and the just want to make it clear that you're taxed at the lesser value, either the appraised value, or for some reason the taxable value is higher than the appraised value, then you're taxed at the the lower of the two. And so this would clarify that. Amelia, do you mind?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, if you turn to page 2 of the balloon, you will note that the provision that is proposed would clarify that when property is subject to the valuation limitation, that final taxable appraised value each year would either be the appraised value of the property as otherwise determined pursuant to law without any limitation provisions applied, or the limited appraised value determined under the new provisions, whichever of those two are less.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, I'll move my motion. Is there a second? It's been moved by Senator Tyson, seconded by Senator Peterson. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're back on the SCR. Committee, what are your wishes? Senator Owens.
Madam Chair, if I might take leave to share a couple of thoughts. I don't have a specific motion at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, as I've heard this, we're on day 10 of the legislative session, and I've spent quite a bit of time trying to wrap my head around what we're actually trying to accomplish with property taxes this session. And I absolutely appreciate our tax committee chair and the tax committee as a whole trying to move swiftly on property taxes, because I think it is the #1 issue facing the citizens of Kansas. To share a couple of examples, I pulled 4 different examples from Harvey County of properties and their increases over the last 10 years. $90,000 house increased 64% in their taxes in 10 years. The next property, a $250,000 house, was 75%, the next one was 81%, and the next one was 106% in 10 years. We know not only as taxpayers ourselves, but as a legislature, that this is an absolutely unsustainable rate of growth. My concern here is that if this amendment ends up on the ballot, that our constituents are going to make the assumption, the inaccurate assumption, but I fear they're going to make the assumption that their tax bill is only going to increase 3% a year. And based on what I am seeing, that is not the case. I think it speaks volumes that we have the Kansas Association of Counties and the League of Kansas Municipalities being neutral on this, because I think that they realize also that this doesn't have the teeth that I would personally like to see, and I'm just speaking for myself. I was asked yesterday when I shared a few thoughts if I had an alternate proposal, and I absolutely do. Problem is I haven't had time to get it into writing, and I haven't had time to introduce it, and we haven't had time to vet it. Because there are models out there. For example, in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has a 2.5% levy ceiling. So they take the actual fair market value of the house and say that property tax cannot exceed 2.5% of the value of that property. And then they also have a 2.5% growth levy limit per year. So they're double covering their properties to insure. And this has been law for many years there. I'm not proposing that we go maybe quite that far. I think that even if we gave latitude, it's worth noting that the U.S. inflation rate over the same 10-year period was 31.1%. I couldn't find a property that didn't increase in taxes at least double that. Even if we use the municipal cost index as our growth levy limit, that's at 37.6%. So I know I'm throwing a lot of information at the committee in very short order, but I'm trying to share this to say that I think that while this may be good in some ways and may be an additional transparency step, I'm concerned that it will not actually hold down property taxes, which is what I feel like I was elected to do. And so with that, I'm not prepared to vote this out of committee today. I would love to spend more time on it. I would love to spend more time on alternatives, to share additional thoughts. And I just wanted to put that on the record and share my thoughts and my concerns over the constitutional amendment. Thank you.
So thank you, Senator. As we are debating the bill, I know I am the chairman, but I am going to respond to a couple of comments you made. One of them, you talked about 10-year valuations and property taxes increasing 80 and 90%. We know that it was not a result of the mill levy increases because of those. We know it was a result of valuation and or a combination of mill levy, but not mill levy. So that in itself is reason to pass this legislation. Another item that you said was that Massachusetts, and I've studied nationwide, Massachusetts has the 2.5% levy limit on the valuation increase. So if that property had an 80% valuation increase in 10 years, all that 2.5% limit would do, they would still have a property tax increase because the levy was the only thing that was limited, not the valuation increase. So that 2.5% would be calculated on top of the valuation increase. And so what we're trying to do here is to individual property owners to level out that those spikes, because not every year in Kansas they will reach that 3% threshold or whatever threshold we deem. But we are getting double-digit valuation increases the last few years, literally taxing people out of their homes, literally, not figuratively. And this conversation has gone on for a few years in this building. And we can keep kicking the can down the road, but while we do, our constituents suffer. So why not allow them the opportunity to vote on this and to decide? And misleading, you say, this committee has been very clear. It does not limit mill levy increases. It still allows for property tax increases. And we were very clear on axe the tax on food, that it was not going to take food sales tax to zero. In fact, the Senate passed legislation that would have taken it to zero. It never got acted on past that. So our consumers go to the grocery store now. I mean, I just had a lady ask me today, when are we going to zero on food? I explained to her, groceries, non-prepared foods are already at the state sales tax of zero, and that's where they're going. So we have been very clear, and this committee has been very clear about what we're trying to do here. So I thank you for your comments.
May I
Senator
follow up?
Owens.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you so much. So you're right, this has been a conversation on this side of the building. So for me personally, and I can only speak for myself, of course, this has been a conversation that's gone on about 5 days. Because in the House, we never took this debate up. And even if we had, it never came up for a vote on the floor, and I wasn't on taxation. So for me, this is all very new, and as a result, quite fast. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that you or this committee is trying to deceive the public at all. I think we're incredibly transparent here. But I think that 99.9% of people aren't listening to this committee, and I don't know that the message is going to get to them. And so while, yes, this will control the mill levy, to your point, what you said, it doesn't control the increases of mills, which is where I think that personally it falls short. I think that this also needs some level of control on the actual controlling of mills as well. So that's just my thoughts.
So if I may, Senator, a couple of suggestions. Mills and revenue can be controlled by state statute. It does not need a constitutional amendment. This needs a constitutional amendment, so that's why we're looking at this legislation in this way. Any other comments?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Senator Klemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for your comments, Senator Owens. I went and took some of the 30-year data that Chair Tyson had provided, because I think it's worth taking a historic look at how does this affect in all 3 categories. And so I looked at years 1994 through 2023, because I think it's important to have a foundation for a starting point. And I would also throw out, there's some assumptions we should probably start to layer into these assumptions, but it's just worth noting that. So when I look at where we've started in 1994 to where we're at today, in residential, we're 534% higher just on where the house is valued at. Commercial is 296, and ag is 206. If you layer in the cap to all of those different columns, at a 3% cap over the 30-year period of time, we would have on residential, the taxes would be 59% lower. On commercial, the taxes would be 41% lower. And on ag, the taxes would be 52% lower. And there's a point that was made earlier when we were having discussion on this, that there's some assumption that some of these, the 3%, will shift onto other columns. But if we look at just where is our starting point, it is a significant improvement over all 3 categories, which I think is worth noting. And then there is some homework when I look at also a constitutional amendment that has the ability to have our constituents make the deciding factor. I think it's worth really taking a look at that. And it also shifts significant transparency onto local governments, which I also think is needed. And because that was missing historically as well. So it was more of just a comment. I appreciate the time, and it was good information. We can get that out so everyone can pick through it and pick at it. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klemp. I appreciate your work. I will, one thing that you said was that taxes would be lower, the taxable value would be lower, if I may,
Thank
Senator.
you, Madam Chair. That's
Yeah.
correct, yes.
I just want to make sure, we just don't want to mislead anybody. The locals could have raised the mill levy. I don't think they would have raised the mill levy enough to capture all that money, though.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any other comments? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not prepared to support this either at this point. I think what we're doing here is really just picking winners and losers. And that's something that we talk about not doing in this building all the time. How many times have I heard on the Senate floor this, senator saying that they oppose this bill because it picks winners and losers? And that's exactly what this amendment would do. It would basically say there's a certain class of homeowners who are going to be paying an artificially low rate in property taxes, and that's going to be made up by having a really high rate on certain other homeowners. So this is really just a tax shift. This is not a tax cut. The locals are still going to get their revenues for their police, for their fire, for their roads. And so what they're just going to do is they're just going to shift it from the kind of preferred homeowners onto other homeowners and onto other classifications of property. We've got our friends from the Farm Bureau here today, and there's a reason that they don't support this amendment. And the reason is that they know that they're going to get whacked by this, because this is just going to be not a tax cut, but a tax shift onto other classifications of property. The other point I would make is this has been tried in California. It's been a massive failure. California is a state that's losing population. I don't think we want to emulate policies from states that are losing population. That's the last thing that we need to be doing in Kansas. This would have a damper on new home construction. We desperately need more homes built in Kansas. This would hurt new homes being built in Kansas. This would disincentivize people from remodeling, which is something that we want to do. Think about all those contractors that wouldn't have the kind of work stream that they would normally have. And so this is really just have the effect of locking people into their existing homes that may need to be remodeled, or that may no longer really serve their needs, but they're not going to want to move because they're getting this massive below market tax shift. And I don't think you have to be a PhD economist to understand that if you have fewer homes on the market, the fewer homes that are going to be on the market are going to be much, much more expensive. So I think this is bad all the way around. I do support property tax cuts, but I think there are more simple and direct ways that we can get real property tax relief into the hands of Kansas taxpayers, but this to me is just not it. So I'll be voting no. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Schallenberger.
Thank you. Again, it's all a matter of equity, and this does kind of pick winners and losers. The homeowners are the winners generally in this, and there's a difference between capping a mill levy and this approach. I called my assessor before this session began, and I said, "Who are the top 50 taxpayers in Cherokee County?" 35 of them didn't live in Cherokee County. It was Casey's, it was Walmart, it was O'Reilly, it was Pizza Hut. You just would go down our main street and all those people live somewhere else. So if we take a mill off of those, they all get a break. Farmers get a break, everybody gets a break, and the homeowners barely see it. If you do this for homes, they get the biggest break. And I understand everybody who represents people other than homeowners. I don't hear much squawking from Walmart. I mean, I probably will after this, over property tax. And they're going to go where rooftops are. It's how it works. O'Reilly goes where there's people that want to buy their product. Retailers decide to go place not based on property tax, but based on whether they can sell their product. Agriculture is assessed at in a whole different model. They just assessed in a different model. It's completely different. I've got a list, as a matter of fact. I'll save it for another day, of how people pay their taxes. But grandma, or me, in my house, that got a 47% increase last year, didn't go up at all this year. I can't plan for that very well. So I think, this isn't perfect. We're not going to find a perfect. This is, the way we tax is just the way it's evolved, and it isn't perfect. But I think this is about as good as you can get into keeping it from going up. The final thing I'll say, I was the mayor, you're gonna hear this over and over, I was the mayor Baxter Springs before I became a state senator. And when we set our budgets, the city assumes there's gonna be assessed valuation increase. There always is. So they can leave that mill levy flat and they're still gonna get more revenue. Now, under the revenue neutral plan, we got to be careful doing that because the people can come in. When you go door to door, we had November elections, and you're going door to door and people are complaining about property taxes. And I told every one of them, I complain too, but it's not our money. The state we get $1.5 million and the rest of it goes to cities and counties. I didn't have, in the 4 years I was mayor, when we did the revenue neutral rate hearings, I had not one citizen show up. We're conservative county. We don't go wackadoo crazy over it. Others had the room full of people. And it's just hard for us to tell the locals they can't do anything, but we at least can tell the appraisers, you appraise it, we're going to assess it, and we're going to assess it at a fair rate that doesn't get anybody. I think this is as good as it gets, Madam Chairman, and I know we're still having a hearing, but if you want a motion, I'll make a
We're
motion.
debating. If
I'll make a
you wanna
motion to
make the
pass it out
motion?
favorable,
As amended?
as amended.
Okay. The motion's been made. It's been seconded by Senator Klump. Motion by Senator Schallenberger, seconded by Senator Klump. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. No. Would you like to be recorded? Sure. All three of you? Okay. Motion carries. Senator Ware, Senator Owens, and Senator Corson would like to be recorded as a no. Committee, I'm going to turn our attention back to SB 35 again. Eddie, thank you.
We've done some looking at the meetings that happened in 2022 and the transcripts of those meetings, and it does not appear that there was ever actually a balloon providing for the Case-Shiller or CoreLogic index. What there was a balloon was for what ultimately became law that year, and there was committee discussion at the time that indicated, I thought we were going to consider specifying a distinct index for this, and this balloon doesn't appear to do that.
Let's just hand out the language that we have from the statute then. Committee, we've got a couple minutes. I think we can finish this bill up. And this would be removing the 1.5 mil that the state collects on property tax. And for the first time, we've heard this bill 3 or 4 times in this committee, and the first time the regents came in neutral. They had suggested an amendment. So we did some research and came up with a little different language, and it's being handed out now. Senator Starnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the amendment is for the Senate Bill 35, and you can read what the amendment is in reference to. And so would move to accept this amendment.
Amelia, do you want to explain the amendment first? Yes. Okay. What we did was took current language from statute. And committee, while we're on this, I'd like to make a motion real quickly to allow the revisers leeway for technical and/or grammatical changes as needed when they're writing bills throughout session. So it'd just be a blanket statement. They never changed the intent of the bill, just the grammar and the technical language. So it's been moved by Senator Tyson, seconded by Senator Peck. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, committee. So Amelia, do you want to explain it?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, here's what I understand the motion to be, and if I'm incorrect, please, Madam Chair, if you could restate it or ask the maker of the motion to restate, to clarify for me, that would be helpful. So my understanding of the motion is to amend, I'm going to look at the bill for a minute. Amend Section 1 And it would amend subsection C, which is one of, what?
Basically,
Oh, is
we're
it? Sorry.
striking, we're about to run out of time.
Sorry,
We're-
section
yeah.
2, subsection C. And instead of the 2% of $50 million, instead of that language, using something very similar to the language that is provided in the handout, which is language that has been used in the past.
Yes, for an inflationary type increase for the number that the regents would receive. Yes. Is that your motion, Senator Starnes?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion? It's been moved and seconded by Senator Peck. Discussion on the motion. Seeing Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So simply stated, it would change the 2% on page 2 and the 2% on page 5, both to, okay.
Yes. Oh, Amelia?
The motion can be as you tell me, as described. My understanding of the Board of Regents was that their request was for their, the language on page 2 in section 2. But if you want it also to apply to the other levy or the other building fund, the state education building fund, or the state institutions building fund, that would be, I think, a little further than how I understood the motion.
Thank you, and thank you for the clarification. We will not do the second. Yes, we'll leave the second one as the 2%. So does the committee understand that? So the 1% that goes to the regions will increase by a 10-year look back on values and calculated as such. The $500,000 that is collected for building funds will be the 2% increase each year. That's the motion before us. Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would move that the Senate Assessment and Taxation Committee pass Senate Bill 35 favorably as amended.
Okay, we do have an amendment before you. Would you withdraw that motion?
I will withdraw the motion, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Corson.
I apologize, and I apologize to the vice chair. Thank you for that courtesy. I think what we just did was really helpful and was good, and I supported it. If you look at the testimony from the regents, they are also concerned about the base that we're starting at with the 50 million. They say that projections indicate that slightly over 56 million will be generated in fiscal year 2026, which is considerably more than the 50 million figure set forth in SB 35. So in order to not have them start from a lowered base, my amendment would just be to change reference to 50 million to 56 million.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion? Senator Starnes. Okay, it's been moved by Senator Corson, seconded by Senator Starnes. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay? No. Would you like to be recorded? No. Okay, motion carries. We're back. Senator Peck, on your motion.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would move that the Senate Assessment and Taxation Committee pass Senate Bill 35 favorably as amended.
Is there a second on the motion? Senator Starnes. It's been moved by Senator Peck, seconded by Senator Starnes. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Committee, thank you for your work. I apologize to Legislative Post Audit. We will get you rescheduled again next week, hopefully. They have some really good information for us. Again, I'd like to thank our Farm Bureau friends for being in the committee room. I know that there was a lot of discussion and interest in this legislation. I told somebody today I wouldn't call them out in particular, but I'm really glad you guys are here, so thank you. Committee, any other business before us? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.